So hello, this is another episode of Tecman Talks Dynamics. I'm here with George Murcott today. George is our tax VAT specialist here at Tecman. I'm James Crowther, should have introduced myself, sorry. And we're going to talk a little bit about the changes that have happened around Brexit as a very topical conversation this morning. George, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So you've been working frantically, I think, over the last, the last couple of weeks since January 1, but also a long period before that. So what's this Brexit thing then? How's it affected the Dynamics Business Central users and what have you seen so far?
I think people actually, because the Brexit process began so long ago, so back in the vote originally in 2016, people seemed to have a bit of fatigue about the whole process at one point as well, because we had the false starts of Theresa May trying to get us the exit deal, and then we were all worried about a no-deal Brexit.
I was going to say the politicians didn't help that, did they really? I mean, they couldn't make their mind up, so why should we? You got to have some sympathy for people.
Absolutely. I mean, our customers have been up against it, trying to find out the relevant facts, and actually the facts change over those years as well, because information that was correct put out there by HMRC, for example, back in 2018, 2019, got revised, in some cases completely withdrawn, as we drew to the end of the transition period. So people may have bookmarked and done their research and found out what they need to do to have it change completely. So we ended up running our webinars for customers pretty much every 2 weeks for the 3-month period in the run-up to the end of the transition period, just to try and give people a synthesis of
and they were the most popular ones we've ever done, right? We had hundreds of people through, I think, by the conclusion of it. I mean,
yes.
It was we had to repeat them because people couldn't get a seat, even on a webinar, and that's pretty special.
Yeah, I was hitting 60 plus attendees on some of them, and some companies attending twice, because they understood that it was a changing situation. Because of the delays, again, back to the politicians, they didn't get the free trade agreement sorted early enough. That delayed things like talking about Ireland's situation, Northern Ireland specifically, and because they knew it was, in effect, a moving situation, some joined in twice and tried to get the very latest information that we could bring together for them. So it was a busy time, yes.
And we've put out a lot of information. I mean, we've got a whole section on our website, I think, that refers to changes required for Brexit, right?
Yes, we decided to create a portal for preparing for EU Brexit, as we've called it, as a separate subsection of a website, to give people access to the webinar that we recorded so they could review it, because let's face it, they're listening to me for 2 hours talking about Brexit and VAT, so if they can stay awake through that, it's a bit of a challenge. But
don't do yourself down, George. Listening to anybody about Brexit and VAT for 2 hours is pretty much going to put most people to sleep.
I actually felt sorry for them. By the end of it, it grew to about 2 hours, 10 minutes, and they're listening to me for that long talk about this topic. But it meant they could re-watch the webinar, and it meant we could also share the published resources, which again we updated quite regularly, but we put together PDF documents on things like how the new posting setup could look in Dynamics Nav or Business Central. We put together a booklet on how to deal with their open documents when we hit the actual transition period. We put together one towards the end of the process about services and how they might be changing or not changing as the route as things proceeded. So we were just trying to share things so people could dip in almost sort of on demand as well, rather than just have to book time with us, because it got so busy. They were so busy because they're dealing with a global pandemic as well as a delayed Brexit situation, and we're busy because of the questions. So it meant they've got a one-stop shop for them.
And if you look at the core finance piece, right, this is probably the biggest change to their VAT setup, VAT statement, et cetera, that they've had since they put Dynamics in. Is that fair to say? Actually,
MTD, Making Tax Digital, did us a bit of a help there, because that's probably the biggest change they had to get over. And because I've been having chats with people about their VAT posting setup and their VAT statement, they kind of, I wouldn't say they were comfortable, but they knew we'd need to do this kind of work because of what we'd had to do for Making Tax Digital. So when we came to the Brexit changes, a lot of them still wanted a bit of help, but were kind of forewarned about what we'd need to do.
And if you're out there and you're using Business Central and you're importing or exporting to Europe, there's changes you should have made by now. Am I right in saying that?
Absolutely. I mean, we've left the EU's VAT regime, so the system set up previously, if you're doing purchasing from the EU, it's going to be using a reverse charge process. It's going to be popping figures into boxes 2 and 4 and doing other things in your VAT statement that it shouldn't be doing anymore. And if you're a reclaim, this is going to put sort of figures that will make HMRC start to take notice potentially. So you might want to just make sure you are doing things in the right boxes.
Before you get to the end of your VAT quarter, there might be, actually by now, there might be a few journals you need to do and to put things right. So was the web address of that portal, because I think a few people might need to go and have a look through that.
So the link is it's www.tecman.co.uk/Brexit.
Well, that's pretty straightforward. And there's loads of other links then to other material that will help both justify what we're saying. We should probably say that we're not liable for any advice that we give. It's best endeavours basis. We're trying to get things right for customers. We've spent you've spent an awful lot of time and effort putting this together and getting this right. But please check out what we're saying.
Yes, quite specifically, all the way through, we've mentioned we're putting ourselves forward as assistance within your system rather than claiming any particular VAT qualification at any point or customs import-export qualifications. What we're doing is synthesising the advice that's out there from HMRC, the gov.uk site, and some of the VAT specialists are out there who've been working with our actual customers. Whilst there's no commercial relationship, we found a couple of our customers have been working with particular accountancy firms who are mentioned in these materials, who have been very helpful, who've had their own Brexit portals, who have put information out there free of charge to anybody that starts them on the right pathway. On that Brexit portal, we link into our blogs as well. They're just worth a quick mention because we've continued this after the end of the transition period. So there's two Brexit-themed blog posts so far, already released in January, trying to mop up, basically, trying to go, look, things are still clarifying, coming to light, here's some points you may not have taken into account of yet. And they'll find those on the same link. So,
great point, because I think that, from my perspective on this, what I've seen so far is that there's still, people are still working out exactly what's required. Particularly the shipping agents, the carriers, freight forwarders, and therefore everybody is kind of scrambling around to try and get it right and asking for different information before they'll take a shipment to a particular place and so on. This was not all done on January 1st. This is a moving target a little bit, isn't it?
Well, yes, we've got the lack of international shipping containers, the backlogs at Felixstowe that were there before Brexit even began to happen, on top of the global pandemic. People are up against a range of things, as well as some confusion in various parts about exactly what's now required to get goods across the border, because whoever you talk to, you can get a different interpretation.
And some of that stuff, those containers were shipped from the Far East, expected to be in the UK well before this all occurred, and because of the delays, suddenly the right paperwork's got to come up, be produced to get those through customs and into the UK ports, right?
Yes, I mean, we were talking to customers saying, look at your supply chain and try and bring things forward to avoid a problem of delays during Brexit, and it happened well in advance anyway.
But that was easier said than done, wasn't it? Really, I mean, you got to say that people were trying, but it wasn't always happening. So, I mean, that's the other aspect. You've got the core finance, the changes to your VAT setup, etc., that you need to do. But import and export documentation seems to be a big topic with this. I've heard the term commercial invoice more in the last 6 weeks than I've heard it in 22 years of my career.
Yes, there's a whole conversation away from finance and VAT, thankfully, that businesses need to be having with different people in the company that do different roles. For example, knowing the Incoterms, the trading terms that you're trading on, so you then know if you're responsible for getting the goods out of the country and importing into the other territory. And those Incoterms To an extent, there's been a concern in some companies about clarifying the terms they're trading on with their customers so they know what they're up against. They know whether they're going to be expected to actually complete both the export and the import. If they're trading X works or delivering duty paid, for example, there's different responsibilities that the business takes on and different administrative costs and an actual cost potentially. They might end up, the concern for some was they might end up having to register in other EU VAT jurisdictions. They might have to register for VAT in France if they were particularly responsible for the importation into France, for example. So there's specialist areas that are worth looking into, but there's also just clarifying with the people you work with, what are our terms of trade, what are these Incoterms, that even that's not simple, because it's not called Incoterms in NAV or Business Central. It's called a shipment method code. So we've had to sort of show people, where's this being stored in the system and what does it do? And that kind of clarification seems to have helped. But it's the business getting its master data in check, so it knows what are the EORI numbers, the EORIs, that they will become crucial to completing your customs documentation. And when we get into talking about Northern Ireland, sort of the XI EORI numbers, the XI VAT reg numbers, that's the current thing that's causing huge confusion, I believe, because people are aware there's these XI numbers, but not necessarily exactly who needs to be using them. And it might be one that we can look at in a future call, perhaps, for a bit more detail for people.
Hey, Tecman got caught by this. We last Friday tried to ship some goods across to Northern Ireland, actually to a new employee that we've got that's joining us over in Belfast there. And, we were a bit stumped by the fact that we didn't know the tariff number for a hoodie, let alone a monitor and a docking station and a laptop and the other things that we try and send new employees when they have to start up remotely these days. So consequently, the courier that we normally use, FedEx, refused to take the shipment. So we had to turn that around and you put together a commercial invoice, even for shipment to an employee. So it wasn't a customer or a sale, no value, but we had to have the documentation to prove that.
We now have the situation of Northern Ireland having a dual status. Northern Ireland has one foot in the EU still, whilst still being part of the United Kingdom. And we have a customs border down the Irish Sea, and we have different rules for Northern Ireland that I suspect there's a degree of overreaction on some freight forwarders in terms of what they're asking for, but I think in 2 months' time we'll have a bit more clarity of exactly what needs to be done. But at the moment, people are still trying to piece their way through what's expected of different types of shipment.
On the on the Clever side, George, we have Clever Shipment Integration, and what that does is send electronic messages direct from BC to particular courier, so that you don't have to type it all into their website when you want to dispatch. And so I've had some responsibility for that over the last few months, and the information via these things called APIs, which is how we talk to the couriers, the information that they've been asking for people like FedEx, UPS, DPD, DHL, could go on. So fairly substantial organisations. That's been changing, dare I say, day by day, and they're all different, which is slightly confusing because you'd think, if they were getting it right, then the information that they'd require to ship stuff to Ireland, Southern Ireland, let alone Northern Ireland, would be consistent. But they all are, it seems like, in a little bit of panic mode and just saying, and actually, we've seen a couple of them actually refuse. I think DPD at the moment is actually refusing to ship goods to quite a few countries on the basis that they're going to wait till they get it right, because they're having some consignments refused and others with exactly the same information are going through. So there's no, I think it's the authorities also have got some confusion here about what exactly is required, and everybody needs to line up. This will settle down, but it's taking a bit of time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the freight forwarders in particular were so concerned about having their shipments delayed at customs, they're moving the point where it's been rejected or delayed to our customer's door, and they're just not taking things unless they're 100% sure that it's going to go through. It's worrying though, if the experts aren't in agreement on what's required, then the rest of us are kind of struggling to keep up with that, and it needs to stabilise soon.
Again, I've got some sympathy for the freight forwarders because, Felixstowe, Southampton, the different ports, because of the congestion they saw in October, November, which, again, made international news, that they've levied quite considerable port charges if your container is stuck in the port. And so if you get your container to that port and can't get it through customs, the freight forwarder, I suppose, is going to be liable for the port charges on that container. So they're trying not to get the problem in the port. They're trying to keep the problem away from the ports, and they're doing that by being ultra careful to make sure it will go through that port faultlessly. So you can see this from every side, can't you? But it doesn't help.
The freight forwarders also, a number of those did have their own dedicated Brexit portals on their website and were being very specific about what exactly they thought they would need. So there's information out there, even if it's not necessarily consistent. I think the key is to talk to your particular freight forwarder, find out the latest take on what they want from you, and be sure to comply with exactly what they say they need from you.
I think the other thing that people can do to get ahead of this, they can start collecting RE numbers from customers and vendors that they're going to transact with, being able to list those on the paperwork, even if you're not cross-charging or whatever, is really useful. They can go through all of their items and set the tariff codes correctly if they're not already there. They can set a gross weight if it's not already there. That's key pieces of information for the commercial invoice. You can get your commercial invoice laid out because there will be countries in the world there electronic trade documents aren't permitted. So some countries are going to insist on an actual original copy, even if it's a PDF that's uploaded to the freight forwarder rather than actually a piece of paper in the box. So get that prepared, get that laid out, get on that process if you haven't already.
Yes, I think a lot of our customers were pretty on the money in terms of getting their systems reviewed and bought into the idea of this shouldn't fall to one person. It shouldn't just be the one person from finance that's attending the webinar that we're running. It should be spread across the team so that the relevant people in purchasing, for example, are reviewing the Incoterms or reviewing the commodity codes that are in use, and then other people are aware of why this data actually matters. Because if they don't communicate internally why it matters, then there's less chance of people actually using the right piece of data at the right time.
Completely. From a sales perspective, you set a customer up. There's a particular set of postcodes which are Belfast, in which case the region should now be set to XI or NI, depending on what you want to do. What you've set up a new country. It's very rare. Actually, the country list has been pretty good to date, but first time in my experience, we're setting up a new country / region. And the region is the important bit in the country table, and setting that and making sure that if you create a customer in that with those postcodes, that's the region code that's set against it, so that that'll pick up and start driving things like the back posting groups and all the rest of the whole way through.
There are some areas where customers may have also missed out on a potential benefit. If it sounds strange to say, there's a cash flow benefit for some of them.
Okay, tell us more. Come on.
The import VAT rules. So there are some customers out there who are used to importing from the rest of the world, and are therefore very used to having the C79, their import VAT certificate. They're used to using a deferment account, so they basically have a sum for the import VAT that's due taken a month later, and they claim it back in the VAT return. The new rules actually apply to both EU and non-EU imports. So all those customers that were originally using their deferment account and handing over a sum of money to reclaim it at the end of the quarter don't have to. The new postponed VAT accounting rules, you can get a monthly statement from HMRC, and you, as long as you tell them at the point of import that you wish to use this as a different payment method, you don't actually pay over any money, because you handle it through your VAT statement at the end of the period, the month or the quarter. You put the amount you owe them in box 1, and you put the amount you're reclaiming, the same figure, in box 4. So there's a cash flow boost there, deliberately designed that way by the British government to assist those companies, because that's one thing they were able to do.
So if you're bringing in from the Far East or from the US or whatever, in effect, you get a benefit there. Is that right?
Exactly that. They won't have to actually pay the import VAT at all up front to reclaim it. So therefore they're gaining that cash for 3 months potentially. They are handling it through the VAT return. No net effect in their balance sheet at all.
Superb. Well, there had to be, what's the old saying? It's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. So it's nice to hear that somebody is actually getting something for all this disruption. So ongoing basis, George. Just to sum up, what obviously keep your eye on our portal that we've talked about, www.tecman.co.uk/Brexit, because any new information you find out will be posted up there, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. We're using the blog posts, and we're using that portal to make sure we're keeping people informed of whatever we think may have just been clarified or might be under people's radar, and then try and make sure they're aware of it. One example for a quick note is the fact that HMRC have put out a new VAT reg number checker. So originally it was an EU service. UK businesses are no longer in that EU VAT reg number checker service. So there's a separate link that you can use from HMRC to check UK VAT registered businesses. That's the kind of thing we're trying to make sure. Practical help.
People are aware of. Okay. And probably the second kind of thing is to make sure your master data is as up to date as you can possibly get it. Fill in any gaps that you have for key pieces of data, tariff codes, ARI numbers, etc., VAT numbers, etc. Correct?
Yes, it's worth mentioning that the Microsoft released a cumulative update. The January 2021 release includes things like fields to store your own EORI number. It includes the supplementary VAT reg number on the company information. It includes a field to store EORI numbers for the customers and vendors on their respective card pages. So you've got Microsoft taking the right steps. So for SaaS customers, it'll be there already, so that they've got the fields to store this kind of master data that is now increasingly crucial.
And actually, for other customers where we've done a customization to add that pieces of information, we were a little quicker with some of those customizations than Microsoft was. Let's just put it that way. The January update I thought was a little bit late, but there we go. So we'll have to organise to migrate that information across to the right place, to the official place, I guess, when the next upgrade comes through for those customers.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, we've put it in the same place virtually.
Yeah, it was a logical place to put it. It just, if I have a moan about Microsoft, it wasn't there quite quick enough. They took a little bit of nagging to actually jump off the fence and commit themselves to what they needed to do, which was a shame. But there we go.
I've got to be fair there. They were quicker than with NTD groups, at least.
Yes. It was vaguely on time for the SaaS customers, at least. But there we go. So third thing is probably short. Talk to your shipping agent, courier company, however you get goods to and from either vendors or customers. You really need to be close to those guys and ask them what they want. I'll stick a plug in for Clever Shipping Agent integration. The reason we've put so much time and effort into that for the last 12 months now is actually because we saw this coming and realised that there was an awful lot of information that you were going to be posting across from Business Central into different portals and so on if we weren't careful, and therefore getting that direct link can be extremely useful where it's actually no extra work other than what you'd previously done once that master data is set up. So another aspect we've seen is where you're selling to consumers, and those consumers, usual thing is that, you're giving refunds, and people are returning goods. So it's become very common. You only need to have a teenage daughter and you'll realize how much that happens. And so, but actually, if you do that across borders now, that's considerably harder, because the return documentation needs to have things like tariff codes, etc., on it, and weights, gross weights of the product. So, including a return document in the box is becoming really critical. Dynamics can produce that for you as part of the delivery note for just those consumer customers. You don't have to send it to everybody. And, we should look at that return document and make sure it's got the right information for them to quickly and easily get that back through customs. Otherwise, that inventory could potentially have a much longer delay coming back, which isn't going to be good for it. It means it's not available for sale, etc. So there's more and more of this that we're discovering, thinking through the real implications of what happens as time goes by, and it's good to do. We will get through this and at the final side soon.
Absolutely. I think it's worth clarifying that underpinning this, like we said at the start, if you're at all unsure on the treatments that you need to achieve in your system for the VAT postings, then take some specialist advice, particularly if you are trading direct to consumers in the EU, because that's perhaps one of the risk factors. If you were using the distance selling regulations, you can't anymore. You're now outside the EU, and I think we'll find some companies who might have had the kind that are mainly business to business, but actually have the occasional business to consumer transaction. So you're going to need a bit more advice in those particular situations, just to get yourself some reassurance of how certain things should be treated.
And I'd finally wrap it up by saying, probably don't be scared of this. I think it's a real shame to see organisations like, our colleague Ryan was talking about, which have just refused to take the order. Okay, this is going to take a little bit of time to get right, but with Dynamics, we've got the right tool set to automate this and to make it straightforward. We need to know what to do, but actually then making it do it is not, doesn't worry me particularly. Maybe a little bit biased, but I don't walk away from those customers and those markets just because, the fear of the unknown. Let's get the known clarified, what we actually need to do. I'm sure that will come out in the next few weeks. I'd be really shocked if HMRC and all the other organisations are too draconian in the short term, because I think the transition period, actually there was a period that the EU have actually proposed today. I saw on the news this morning that the ratification of the treaty is not going through Europe quite as quickly as they thought. So actually it's going out to the end of March before that's actually ratified. So I think we've still got a little bit of time to go on change on this yet. Once we get there, once we ratify it, this is going to be one of those things like a lot of other crises that we've seen in kind of business systems over the years. I'm old enough to remember year 2000. We had a lot of work to do then. We got through it, and nobody talks about that since. I think this is going to be another one where we will get through it and get the systems right. And then in 6 months' time, probably everybody will be saying, well, I don't know what the fuss was about. Would you agree with that?
Yes, as soon as we can get back to smooth trading with not needing to talk about VAT all the time and separate rules and just being clarified, and just get on with buying and selling and running the business systems. So
thank you, George. I think thank you for all of the work that you've done over the last 6-9 months on this. I think it's been spectacular. You've certainly kept all your colleagues in the loop and an awful lot of customers as well. Somebody had to take the lead. Sorry you got the short straw. We'll try and find a different, victim, shall I say, next time something big like Brexit comes along. Will there be another time? I hope not. But Who knows? But really great effort, and I know there's been lots of thanks from a lot of our customers for the stuff that you've put out. So I'll add to that.
Yeah, thank you. The customers, they've been really positive actually, because they appreciate the assistance that we as a team are giving them, because they're aware that we've got developers and account managers, and we've been very focused as a business to support them, and it seems to be rightly appreciated. So that's good to hear.
So thank you, everybody. Look, don't delay any longer. If you haven't done anything about Brexit yet, get in touch quickly, because time is of the essence here. We need to get some of those changes to your finance system done ASAP, and we need to work out what other changes you need to do. Don't let your business suffer. Don't regret it later on. Get on this now, please. Give us a call if you need to. Thank you. Thank you, George.
Thank you.